Chris, I think we can kick off. We're at 7 members, and I believe all 7 that are present here were at the prior meeting.
Yeah, that's correct. We have 7. We could start if you want.
Okay, yeah, let's kick into it. Michelle, you're good?
Good. Thank you.
All right. Okay, here we go. Good evening and welcome to the October 19th, 2020 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Stephen Spur and I am the chairman of the Summit Zoning Board. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. This meeting is being conducted virtually via video conferencing in lieu of meeting in the council chamber of Summit City Hall. This meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page. Members of the public can view the meeting by following the link provided on the agenda. Dennis Galvin is the zoning board's attorney. He will advise the board members on matters of law and is the key interface with an applicant's attorney. Mr. Galvin does not vote on the applications. Chris Nicola is a city employee and is the zoning board secretary. Mr. Nicola works with applicants on getting their applications together, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. Mr. Nicola does not vote on the applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearings tonight, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Some applications require 5 affirmative votes to be approved. You'll be told which majority will be required before we begin our deliberations. Mr. Nicola, please call the roll of the members.
Sure. Chairman Spur,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Newell,
Here.
Mr. Yuko,
Here.
Mr. Laderi. We're expecting him at this point, but he's not here yet. Mr. Steiner is excused. Mr. Mullen,
Here.
Ms. Schwartzstein,
Here.
Mr. Millay,
Here.
Mr. Voikits.
Here.
For the record, Mr. Galvin is here. He's our board attorney, and you have a quorum. You can proceed.
Excellent. We generally hear the cases in the order they are listed on the agenda. We try to have each hearing last no more than 30 minutes, but we do understand that some cases are too complex to be heard within that time frame. Each hearing begins with the applicant or their attorney giving an overview of the application and the variances that are required. We then hear from any expert witnesses the applicant may have to help explain the application and why the variances are needed. The board members may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and the expert witnesses. Once the board members and the board professionals are done with their questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think about this case. That opportunity comes at the end of the hearing. Before you ask your questions, we need to know who you are and where you live. It is important that our court reporter be able to keep a clear and accurate public record. Please state your name before speaking or asking any questions. And please do not talk over each other. This is even more important under the current circumstances. But I'd add to that as well, please keep yourself muted if you're not speaking. After all witnesses have been heard, members of the audience have their second opportunity to speak, and at that time, you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed, and we will go into executive session where the board members discuss the case and vote. You'll be able to listen to our executive session, but you will normally not be able to participate in our discussion. Most applications are heard and decided in the same evening. If a case requires additional information or testimony that cannot be presented tonight, we will carry your case to another date and it will not be decided tonight. Krista Anderson, the city's zoning officer, has asked that I remind all applicants that they must read carefully the resolution that documents the zoning board's decision and to pay particular attention to the conditions contained in the resolution. For example, if a landscaping plan is required, you must obtain one and submit it to John Linson, the city's forester. If a grading plan is required, you must have one prepared by a civil engineer and submit 3 copies along with the application fee to the city's engineering division. Failure to satisfy all conditions in a resolution will result in a delay in approving your application, as it will cause extra work for city zoning staff. The resolutions documenting the board's decision will normally be available 1 month after we decide the case. Not to confuse anyone, there is in fact only one case to be heard this evening, a continuation of Beacon Unitarian Church 4 Waldron Avenue, which I saw Mr. Kronheim is here, and of course Mr. Miner representing the applicants. So Mr. Minor, if you'd like to kick us off, we'll give you the spotlight again.
Mr. Chairman,
oh,
we just
sorry.
note that Mr. Laderi is present.
Oh, welcome, Mr. Laderi. All right, Mr. Minor, it's yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Roger Maynard, Summit Office of Lindaberry, McCormick, Estabrook, and Cooper. I represent Beacon Unitarian. As you all remember, we got through, I think, our first two witnesses in September. The Reverend Bogus from the church and our architect, Mr. Titoni. The next two witnesses we'll cover tonight would be Sanjay Patel, professional engineer, who's our site engineer from PS&S, and Betsy Doland, also professional engineer from Doland and Dean Consulting Engineering, who performed the traffic study. We do have a third witness, Paul Phillips, our planner, but based on the September hearing, I'm anticipating that probably Mr. Phillips will be for another night because it will probably take a while to get through these two witnesses. That being said, I did have one sort of hangover item I wanted to cover very briefly with Mr. Titoni, the architect. Something was raised a month ago that I asked him to, we in the church asked him to take a look at quickly. So if I might just recall him for very limited purpose, there was a question raised as to whether windows on an adjoining property would be blocked by the new construction. So we asked him to take a close look at that and be sure. So if I could recall him and ask him to recognize he's still under oath, I'd just like to ask him to cover that very briefly.
Welcome back, Mr. Tony.
State full name, spell your last name.
Yes, Pat Tony, T as in Thomas, A-T-T-O-N-I.
You're still under oath.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Titoni, you did, on behalf of the church, you're asked to take a look at whether there was going to be any impact on the windows of the adjoining commercial building if the new sanctuary is constructed?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and what were your conclusions?
The conclusions are that there are 4 windows currently on that adjacent property, and this new sanctuary will not.
I can't hear him.
Your video is fading, Joe.
Sorry.
Or your audio, excuse me.
Seemed to have the same problem last time. The existing windows, there are 4 existing windows. We were able to determine from some historical.
I can't hear him.
I still can't hear you.
Hang on.
Are you using computer audio?
I am.
Yeah.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We'll keep an eye on it.
Okay.
You start out good, and then you die out.
There are 4 windows on the adjacent property.
No, you're breaking up. Jim. You're breaking up.
It's breaking up, Joe.
Maybe it's my location. Hang on. Can you all hear me now? Any better?
Yes.
Okay. There are 4 windows on that adjacent.
Not breaking up again. Once you start talking after more than 2 words, it breaks up. Are you on wireless?
I am.
You can try dialing in if it's easier on your cell, Mr.
Or
Titoni.
the other thing is skip this witness and go into the next witness.
Yeah.
The problem.
You beat me to it. Joe, maybe we should come back to you later.
And I'll dial in.
Yeah, try dialing in. And after we finish with Sanjay, maybe if you could dial in, we'll cover this.
I will.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about the technical glitch. So let's call Sanjay Patel to the stand, please.
Sanjay, raise your right hand. Tell me you got it raised.
I got it raised.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about the given this matters the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your full name for the record. Spell your last name.
Patel, P as in Peter, A-T-E-L.
Okay.
First name?
And could you spell your first name also?
S-A-N-J-A-Y.
Okay. And what are you licensed in, Sanjay?
I'm licensed as a professional engineer in New Jersey and New York.
All right. Provide us with 3 boards in New Jersey you've appeared before.
Yeah, most recently I've been before multiple boards. Recently I've been before town of Kearney, township of Woodbridge, and Franklin Township.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, do we accept his credentials?
We will. Welcome, Mr. Patel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sanjay, you are employed by PS&S, correct? The site engineers for this application?
That's right.
And you are directly involved in the preparation of the plans that are before the board, and you're fully familiar with them?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So I think with reference to the plans that are on file, if you would just, in a narrative way, just walk the board through the site plan as proposed and the various aspects of it.
Sure. Can I share the screen?
Sure.
Please let me know if you see the screen.
Yes.
Everybody sees that?
So these are the plans that are on file, correct? There are no changes to these.
No changes. These are the record signed and sealed plans that were submitted last.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the complete set. We're looking at the existing conditions plan as described in previous testimonies. There are two lots, lot 1, block 2608, and lot 2, same block. The property boundary goes right in the middle. And the L-shaped lot, lot number 2, is divided into 2 zones. Lot number 1 is in residential zone, R10. Lot number 2 is northern part of it is in residential zone, and the western part, this part here, is in business zone. What you see here is the existing chapel and the extension in the back. And on the lot number 2, we have the former funeral home, currently recently occupied by the real estate offices, residential apartments, and a garage in the back. The proposed plan calls for demolition of most of the improvements, existing improvements within the existing lot number 2. That includes the parking, paved areas, the buildings, as well as the concrete walkway and driveway. We will be eliminating the driveway from Springfield Avenue and removing all the current improvements. And with that, let me go to the demolition plan. So that shows the extent of the demolition, which is the paved area in gray shading here. The crosshatch represents the removal of the existing building and minor improvements within the public right-of-way, Springfield Avenue. The proposed plan calls for a new pedestrian access from Springfield Avenue. The existing driveway will be eliminated. We have bluestone pavers proposed at the entrance, a lawn area on either side, proposed sanctuary building, approximately 6,042 square feet. Going up north, we have new walkways around the new sanctuary building, a playground with a permeable surface, approximately 40 feet by 40 feet, 1,600 square feet is proposed in the back. The crosshatch area you see here is the access, emergency access for fire department. So that's a fire access 20 feet wide, about 120 feet long. And we have landscaping buffer, which I'll go over in a minute in the proposed plan.
Sanjay, what's the surface of the fire access? Is that grassed?
Yeah, that is a proprietary system, Grasscrete. It's a permeable, pre-molded, plastic molded, pour in place concrete pavers with voids that allows the infiltration and allows the growth of turf. So it's an artificial, natural turf that can grow within those grass pavers, and the grass pavers are capable of taking those vehicular loads and allows the area to be permeable. So that is considered a pervious area. The playground area is pervious too. Around those areas is lawn area. Let me go to the front of the lots. And we have approximately 20 foot of depressed curb currently serving that driveway. That will be eliminated, will be replaced by a new curb. And the old apron that was removed will be replaced with the new walkways. The access ramps will be provided from the intersection of Springfield and Waldron Avenue. The access from Waldron Avenue, this one will be maintained. There are two other access points available here that are maintained too. The other one on the north side will be used for the fire access. It will be widened. Any questions so far on this one?
No.
All right, so what we're looking at here is the grading and utilities plan. Basically, we are maintaining the storm drainage pattern. In other words, whatever was flowing to Waldron is in proposed condition also flowing into Waldron Avenue. Same thing with the Springfield Avenue. So we are not changing the drainage pattern and thereby not changing the runoff quantity. But we are actually reducing the quantity significantly by reducing the impervious area. The total reduction in impervious area is about 35% compared to the existing condition, combined lots, basically because of the removal of the existing buildings as well as the paved areas. So ultimately, the flows that will be going into the Waldron and Springfield will be significantly less than existing condition. So that's a significant improvement.
Sanjay, there was a comment in the engineer's review asking that the drainage from the new structure, from the roof of the new structure, be directed to Springfield rather than Waldron. Was that acceptable and accomplished?
That is acceptable. Currently, almost half of the sanctuary building, as you see, is connected through this storm sewer here, the proposed one, into the Springfield Avenue drainage system. But I recognize the city engineer's comment, and it is doable, and we will be able to do that.
Okay, so that will be included in the final plans.
That will further reduce the already reduced runoff to Waldron, so that will improve it further.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the storm drainage. We have other utilities for the new sanctuary building, gas, electric, and water lines to be connected to utilities within Springfield Avenue. No major grading changes on the stormwater grading and drainage plan. It basically maintains the existing grades within 6 inches or a foot of that. The site is pretty flat. What we're looking at here is the landscaping and lighting plan. We have proposed 6 bollard lights, 3 feet high, and providing code required minimum and average lighting along the walkways. So there are 6 bollards proposed, providing minimum of a 1 foot candle, and that will provide lighting for the sidewalks within the property. There will be, in addition to the bollards, light bollards on the ground, there will be 3 building mounted lights as shown here, 1, 2, and 3. And that will also add to the lighting that is at the access points to the building.
So those building lights, Sanjay, those are code required exit lights, is that correct?
That is right.
Yeah, they're not something that washes the side of the building with light, just for the exit.
They will be shielded, and so they will not spill over.
Okay.
But that's a minimum code required lighting at the access point.
Thank you.
As compared to current condition, there is significant amount of landscaping proposed. At the northern property boundary with lot 29, I believe, 10 Waldron Avenue, all the existing trees are remaining. Some of the trees are on 10 Waldron, some of them are on the sanctuary property. However, none of the trees are proposed to be removed, so that buffer, existing buffer will remain. And in addition to that, we have proposed significant numbers of ornamental and evergreen trees, shrubs along the frontage. And we have at least about an average of, it varies between 11 to 16 feet, average of 14 foot of buffer on the north side of the fire access. The whole area will be looking green, except for the playground area here, which has, that is also a poured in place rubber-based surface. It's impact resistant and it is very porous. It will let approximately 12 inches of rainwater pass through, which is way more than a 100-year storm event. So that provides a big significant improvement in the runoff. It will not increase, it will actually decrease the runoff from the site. A lot of other landscaping proposed in the front of the sanctuary building. We have ornamental trees in front of the building, a big, large shade tree proposed at the corner. Existing trees by the existing church are to remain. There are a couple of trees that needs to be removed here for the future improvements, and they are 6 inches or some smaller caliber. That is basically it.
And you had made revisions to the landscape plan based on the city forester's comments, correct?
That's true, yes. We have communicated with them, had gone back and forth a couple of times and satisfied all the comments.
Okay.
Any questions?
No. I think you covered the drainage and the environmental aspects here with the addition of the green space and the emergency access. A question was asked last time about whether it was feasible to add parking to this site. Did you, in fact, as part of your planning and design phase, take a look at adding some on-site parking here?
Yes, I did. And let me start with the existing parking. The existing parking is not a fully conforming parking. And if we were to provide the play area and the way the program runs for the architects, the new building occupied here, that does not leave enough area to get in and out. In other words, there is not much of a turnaround area. You would basically have a dead-end parking. Also, if we manage to get some parking, it will obviously not be enough, and that will add another variance and constraint of much more storm drainage impact of this site. And we will obviously not have an opportunity to provide the landscaping that we've had in the green space that the applicant has, planned for.
So do you recall if you basically paved the entire backyard here, removed all the buffers and put a curb cut out to Waldron, approximately how many spaces you actually could fit on the site?
With the sanctuary building there,
Correct, with the new building.
more than with no green space, no buffers, landscape buffers along the northern boundary or the eastern boundary along Waldron. you could get about 15 spaces.
That
But
would be
again,
a
as I
max.
said, that will still may not, you will not have a turnaround.
So
you
that would
go in
not
there-
be, so that would not be a very functional space, even
Not
if it,
functional. It's actually, people without knowing the parking lot is full or not will go in there. And if it is full, there is not much turnaround space.
so you don't consider from a design standpoint, that would not be a desirable situation. Is that correct?
That will not be a desirable situation, definitely not.
Okay. Now, there were questions asked about the playground in particular, what the equipment might look like, the size of it, location, and so forth. Are you familiar with that?
That's right. The playground, and this is the manufacturer's cut sheets that we're looking at. And the playground will have certain equipments. It is the final playground equipments are somewhat preliminary right now, but there will be equipment for age group 2 to 5. I think 3 of them, and 2 of them for age 5, between 5 and 10. And they will be looking somewhat like this, with the porous rubber-based surface, impact-resistant surface, and the fall height of up to 6 feet.
So these are just typical renditions of the kinds of equipment that would be on the playground.
That's true. I think Reverend Emily can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are, there's a slide proposed, high bar, a ladder, and a small climb wall.
Okay.
These are the
And there,
equipment.
and this playground is not lighted, correct?
It is not. It is not intended for the evening or night use.
Okay. And as an engineer, would it be your feeling that this playground is effectively screened by the landscaping that's provided?
Yes, and let me go back to the landscaping plan to show that. So, as you see on the landscaping plan, there is approximately 20 foot of existing buffer, which will be enhanced to fill up any gaps. So there won't be any much visible, areas of the playground from Waldron. Same thing with the northern border also. We have a significant amount of landscaping. There is an existing line of trees, and we'll be adding much more to that. So that will also provide, a reasonable screening from the northern property boundary also.
Sanjay, let me ask you for a question for a second. The playground equipment that you were showing, is that from the plan that's on file as part of the application?
Yes, that is from the statement of facts and law.
Well, that wouldn't be in the statement of facts and law, but apparently there is.
Actually, it was attached to that in the township documents.
So this is from what's online in the city's documents.
That's right.
Okay. All right. I have just one other question. Your plans include a zoning analysis and a chart that summarizes the variances that are required, correct?
That is right.
Yeah, I don't want to cause anyone to go into a coma by going through that with you, but just if you can confirm that you prepared that and that's, in your view, an accurate representation of the existing and proposed conditions under the ordinance.
I agree with that.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions at this point for Mr. Patel.
Maynard, we'll give our board professionals an opportunity to ask any questions. Either Mr. Dower, I think I saw Mr. Snekis jump in there, tag team out.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, welcome. Mr. Dower, you'd like to kick us off? I don't know if there's any questions you have of this testimony.
Yeah, if you could just explain the drainage for the fire access road and then also the playground, how that's going to drain into the ground underneath, or if there's going to be some type of a area that's going to direct drainage towards a point.
Okay, let me go to the drawing again. I hope you see the drawing. You see the drawing?
No.
We're looking at the grading and drainage plan here, and you want me to explain how it will drain, right?
Yeah, for the playground and also the fire access area that's got the concrete pavers or the grass
Right.
pavers.
So we have a number of inlets, new inlets, small area inlets proposed. So as you see, this area slopes towards this inlet. There will be a new inlet here, couple of inlets here. This will pick up the roof drains, which now, as per your request, we will divert it to the Springfield Avenue. About half of the sanctuary building was, the roof drains from the half of the sanctuary building was connected to, or proposed to be connected to this storm sewer here. That storm sewer goes into this inlet, which is the low spot on the site. So all this area drains to this through sheet flow. And then that inlet will be connected to an existing inlet on site. And that inlet is already connected to the 15-inch storm sewer in Waldron. So that's how the drainage is proposed in the back.
But it will be directed out towards Springfield, correct?
The roof drains of all the sanctuary buildings will now be redirected to this new storm sewer, which was already taking half of it approximately. Now, I think working with the architects, we have confirmed with them that it is possible to bring all the roof drains in the front to Springfield. So that will reduce the flow into this line.
Okay, so there will be still some drainage going to Waldron, is that correct?
There'll be some drainage, but much less than existing condition. It was already reduced a little because of the less impervious area. Now it will be further reduced.
Okay, and then the other question we had was regarding the bluestone pavers in the front of the church facing Springfield. Is there any possibility of them becoming some type of a porous paver system?
Yeah, I had a discussion with the applicant and the architects too, and for various reasons, including the maintenance, the high heel issue, because the porous, even though they say they are ADA compliant, the high heel is still a problem because the porous pavers requires open joints, and frequent maintenance is an issue. And especially when we are, significantly reducing like 35% of 35% less storm drainage from the site, making this pervious will not, reduce drastically from what it's reduced already. So it's a trade-off that for a safety and maintenance purposes, their preference is to keep it is as proposed, the bluestone pavers, which is on the concrete base.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Dower. Mr. Snekus, anything you'd like to ask about at this time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I entered the testimony when you were talking about the landscaping, and I know you're proposed the landscape buffer towards the rear of the property. One of the things that we've been discussing earlier in other testimony is the area along the westerly side where the existing prior building will be demolished, and adjacent to the nearest commercial building to that westerly side will be a blank wall in the front yard. You're pointing to the rear yard area right now, but if you look at the front yard area, if you would pan towards the front, towards Springfield, correct. That area there would be a long building wall of undifferentiated architecture on that side. I think we had asked if the applicant would look at any landscape improvements on that side to help offset the impacts of that long wall.
Yes, we discussed that also, and yes, there is a possibility of adding some more trees here to show that, but we'll have to plan in a way that it leaves the way open for this egress from the building. But it is possible, and we will be able to do that.
Okay. Regarding the playground details that you had provided, do you know the height of the structures themselves that are proposed?
Not specifically, because this is still conceptual.
Can they be provided in general terms?
They will be, in general terms, they will be limited to fall height for the kind of
Wait a minute, I didn't understand that. They will be limited to what?
It will be limited by the fall height of 6 feet or less.
Okay. So you would anticipate what would be the maximum height of the structure itself?
I would imagine between 8 to 10 feet tops.
8 to 10 feet. Did you discuss the fencing or enclosure for the play area?
There is no enclosure proposed, no.
There isn't. Is there any fencing that's to protect or keep a child from straying towards Waldron Avenue?
There is an existing fence which will be extended. That aluminum picket fence, 4 feet high, will be continuous, and there'll be a gate for the fire access here. So it will be protected here.
Okay. Thank you.
And there's,
further.
I think we covered in last time, but there's no intent that there be public access to this playground through the gates. Those gates aren't going to be available to the general public to go in and out. So,
right. My question was more geared towards anyone who's using the playground, errantly running towards the street and not being contained by a fence of some type. It's something that I would offer the applicant to consider.
I think they are actually. I think
Okay.
the proposed fence encloses the whole backyard.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that.
Sure.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now questions from members of the board for this witness.
I have a couple, or really it's a three-part question. Mr. Patel or Mr. Maynor, if Mr. Maynor wants to answer. The fire chief had several comments related to the firefighting access roads relating to reflective edge delineators and the Knox
I'm
padlock.
sorry, Mr. Uka, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, why? I'm trying this microphone. The fire chief had three questions related to the flexible reflective edge delineators for the firefighters access road, the Knox padlock to secure the firefighting access road, and also agreeing to snow removal. I just want to hear the applicant affirm that those conditions are acceptable.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Yes. They are acceptable.
Okay. I think everything else I had was answered.
Just maybe to pause there for a moment, Mr. Galvin, I think we've heard mostly, and Mr. Maynor, you can correct me, that the applicant finds it acceptable to ultimately accept the engineer's letter and the conditions outlined in the engineer's letter. Would it be appropriate to add as well acceptance of the fire chief's comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
That's acceptable, Mr. Maynor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions from members of the board? I'm scanning, not seeing any. The only question that I did have, Mr. Patel, can you just describe to us now the present stormwater the present stormwater conditions on the property? I'm not entirely familiar with the specifics to Waldron, but I do know that part of town tends to have, or maybe had years ago, some flooding issues. Can you describe just kind of what the stormwater conditions are in that area and what they exist on the site particularly today?
Yes. So on the site, there are, even in existing condition, there are no signs of ponding or flooding. It does flow all the way. I believe the storm sewer capacities, this is from talking to the city engineer, that we have a limited capacity in the storm sewers within Springfield Avenue as well as more on Waldron Avenue. And in heavy storm events, larger storm events, 25, 10 year, or anything more than 10-year frequency, it is possible that it could be backing up, but I have not heard of any flooding issues on the site.
Thank you. All right. Without any further questions from members of the board, speak now or forever hold your peace. We'll move to questions from the public, and Mr. Kronheim, we'll start with you as you're representing a number of the neighboring properties there, I believe, on Waldron.
That's correct. Thank you. David Kronheim from the firm of Clement Mueller on behalf of the objectors. I put my appearance in last time, so there are no changes to that list of clients. I renew my objection as to the form of the meeting as violative of the New Jersey Constitution, the municipal land use law, not making any provision for a virtual meeting, and also the recently enacted NJAC 5:39-1 at SEC, the emergency remote meeting protocol for local public bodies. Just put that out of the way. Thank you. I'd like to start just with a couple of simple questions. The site plan that you're proposing is for one combined lot. Is that correct?
That's true.
Right. There are currently two lots, and you're proposing to combine them into one.
That's right. Upon approval, board's approval, it is intended to be consolidated.
Okay. And all the requirements that the applicant must meet, together with all the variances that the applicant is seeking, are based on that one combined site plan. Is that correct? As opposed to separate.
That's true.
Okay. And all the calculations you've made in the chart that's been entered into the record, they're based on the proposed physical condition after construction, again, on that one combined lot, correct?
Yeah, however, the houses of worship is a conditional use on both zones, and there are specific requirements for the houses of worship, for that conditional use. And where those requirements are not present, not specific, then we have applied the individual zone which it belongs to.
Okay.
Which is basically different.
So let's do a little bit of third grade math. I'm a lawyer, not an engineer, so you'll have to bear with my simple math. When you calculated the lot coverage, can you talk to us? How did you calculate the lot coverage? Can you just walk us through that?
So the lot coverage is the total impervious area, the proportion of total impervious area in comparison with the total lot area.
So you took what your demolition plan, what you're going to remove, what you're going to build on top of the site. So basically the existing plus the existing condition that was going to remain, plus the new construction that you were going to build on top of that.
That's right.
Okay.
So the existing condition is existing condition, whatever it is, impervious, pervious. In proposed, we take out all that's removed and not replaced with the impervious area.
Okay, and same for the maximum building coverage. You took the existing plus the new, and that's how you derive that number?
That is right.
Okay, and the same for the parking. You took the existing plus the new and combined that, and that's came up with the parking requirement?
That is right. There is no parking proposed currently, yes.
Okay, and the final proposed building is one building, is that correct?
There are two buildings.
They're connected, but they are connected, are they not?
They are.
One could walk from one into the, one quote unquote building into the other quote unquote building, not sitting west, okay, without going outside. Okay. And how many seats are there combined in that building?
In the new sanctuary building, there are 400 seats, and I believe the existing one has 150.
So in total, how many seats are there?
Combined two buildings would be 550, 555,
okay.
I guess.
And you're familiar with the engineer's report that the parking requirement is one parking space per 3 seats, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So the parking requirement, let's assume, using your number there, if there are 550 seats in the combined building, what would the parking requirement be?
I understand your point, but the 400 seat is with the condition, it's with the commitment from the applicant that there will not be any simultaneous use. So although there are two buildings, yes, theoretically, you can apply that number if it is intended for both buildings to be used at the same time.
Well, firstly, just to be clear, you just tested, it was your testimony a moment ago that it was actually one building, was it not?
It is still two separate buildings connected with a breezeway.
Okay. Either way, if there are 550 seats and the parking requirement is 1 per 3 space, what would the parking requirement be then?
It will be more than 134. It will be.
Okay, that's all I wanted to get in there. Thank you. And we heard testimony earlier from the architect that there was no technical reason that the applicant couldn't have provided some parking on site, in the sense that there was no physical condition preventing that the addition of parking on site somewhere. Do you agree with that assessment from the architect?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure.
Again, please?
Sure. We heard testimony from the applicant's architect that there was, quote, no technical reason the applicant could not have provided some parking on site. And then upon clarification, he clarified that meant there was no physical condition, a steep slope, wetlands, or something that would have prevented the construction of some parking on site. Would you agree with that assessment?
I agree with that.
Okay. And you are removing 16 spaces from the parking lot, is that correct?
That's true.
Okay. And in your testimony, you talked about the need for a playground and the fact that there couldn't be. I don't want to incorrectly paraphrase. So maybe I'll ask you. Your testimony, is it fair to say that your testimony was that the playground hindered the number of parking spaces that would be available on site?
Again, I would like you to repeat the question.
Sure. Is it fair to say that your testimony was that the playground took the place where there could otherwise have been parking spaces?
But yes, I agree with that. But I also say that it may not be a conforming parking area.
Okay, but and just to be clear though, a playground isn't a requirement for the zone, is it?
I don't believe so.
No, but parking is, and that's why you're here for a variance.
Yes.
Okay.
Easy does it. This guy is the engineer.
I understood. I think
this isn't a matrimonial matter, you know.
He's testified on direct as to the fact that the parking that the playground was.
He got the directive from his client that they'd like to.
That's okay, but we're entitled.
You have to speak one at a time, or it won't be on the record.
Sorry, we're just probing his.
Like the judge, Mr. Kronheim.
just probing his testimony. Okay, and so with no parking, it's the applicant's position then. With the let me rephrase. The church does intend to rent what, 6 spaces off-site, I believe, is the testimony, roughly.
I think this is probably more for the parking study rather than Mr. Patel.
You got a parking expert, you got an architect, you got the person from the church. Not every witness is going to answer every question.
Understood, Mr. Galvin, but this goes to the physical condition of the property and the suitability for some on-site parking. I promise I will keep it brief.
All right.
Okay. So with the exception of those handful of rented spaces, it's the applicant's position that the downtown and the neighboring residential neighborhoods should bear 100% of the parking.
That's not a question. That's an argument. Let's move on.
With all due respect, it's a question that's based in testimony that's already in the record.
It's not a question.
It absolutely is a question.
It's your position.
I would like to hear the engineer answer the question, please.
Don't answer the question, Mr. Patel. Ask the question differently, Mr. Kronheim.
Okay, I will ask the question differently. Where, if there's no parking on site, are all of the congregants and users of the church supposed to park?
That will be covered under the parking consultant's testimony.
Would it be fair to say they park off site?
Report for that. And
Wait a minute. I didn't understand. I didn't hear what you said because 2 people were speaking.
Sorry, Mr. Patel, go ahead.
I said the question that you asked will be answered in the traffic expert's testimony.
Would it be fair to say they park off site?
Don't answer the question. I think that the response, not the appropriate witness.
He is the appropriate witness as to the fact he's testified that he could not put any parking on the site, that there were 15 spaces could have been put on the site, but that the physical constraints of the site led to his decision not to include, the applicant's decision not to include any parking. I think we should have some latitude to probe whether or not any spaces could have been put on the site. I don't think that's argumentative.
But that's not what you're asking them.
It absolutely is. We're asking where the people are going, where the congregants are going to park. And we've had, you cut short my previous question about whether
I'll cut it short again.
the parking is being allocated.
And you're talking over me on top of it.
Go
It's
ahead.
hard enough. We're in a Zoom format. You're challenging the format, but I've done like 30 of these and I haven't had anybody go back and forth with me like this. You have to be nice in this format. Can't do some of your normal stuff.
Mr. Galvin, with all due respect, we're here to be zealous advocates for our clients. And these are fair questions.
There's a lot of people on this Zoom call, man. Okay? And we're all trying to gain the same information that you are. And there's another witness that can give you that answer.
The parking expert is going to talk about the off-site parking requirements. Here, we're talking about something distinct from that, which is that the applicant has testified that they cannot change the physical layout of the property to incorporate parking. That's not an appropriate question for the parking expert. It's an appropriate question for the engineer.
So ask them, can you add the 15 spaces? Mr. Patel, could you add 15 spaces to this property?
We can add 15 spaces if we don't have any green space, if we don't have any buffer, and if we can live with a dead end parking, which is not safe.
All right, that's the answer.
Mr. Gavin, that wasn't the question. The question was, could he add any parking spaces to it? How many could you add? What type of compromise, what solutions do you consider when it came to deciding whether or not you would add any parking spaces?
Again, as I said, with the existing buffers that we want to maintain and add to the buffer, improve the existing buffers along the property boundaries, and maintain the impervious areas, we would not be able to put a significant number of parking spaces.
Could you put any parking spaces?
Of course you could put, theoretically, you could put parking. You could put maybe 2, 4, I don't know. But again, that will come at a cost of the impervious area compromised, buffers compromised, screening compromised, and you leave the access for the fire truck and you have almost nothing left.
But in fairness, this lot, let's go to the table, if you will. This is a conditional use, and the minimum lot area for this conditional use is what?
2 acres.
2 acres. And how big is the proposed combined lot?
Approximately 30,500.
So roughly speaking, 0.7 acres, is that fair?
That's right.
So it's roughly 1/3 the size of what's permitted in the zone as a conditional use. So is it fair to say that the lot is undersized for the zone?
Obviously it is.
Okay. And so
that's why we're asking for the variance.
Of course. My question to you, though, is that if you had kept the 16 parking spaces, your impervious coverage would certainly have gone up then, correct? I think that was your testimony earlier.
That's true.
Okay, so any benefit from reducing the lot coverage comes at the expense of even making an attempt to meet the parking requirement, correct? Is that a fair statement?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
The benefit of reducing the lot coverage comes at the expense of having any parking whatsoever. I'm sorry.
I still don't understand what the question is.
Okay. If you had I just asked you whether if you had all the parking spaces that you currently had, all 16 of them, and if you made provision for those 16 in the current, the final plans, obviously that would have led to more
cost of impervious areas. Yes.
Right.
But,
So
wait a minute. I didn't hear the answer.
It will be at the cost of losing the pervious areas that we are creating.
Okay. And that's all I want to do. The trade-off there. You talked a little bit also about let's see, the storm sewer, and that there was never I believe it was your testimony, there was never an issue with the condition on site. Is that correct? With flooding?
That's true.
Are you familiar with the surrounding neighborhoods and the flooding that has occurred in those neighborhoods?
Not the distant neighborhood, but nearby this property, I have not heard of or aware of any flooding situation.
So you're not aware of any flooding on Waldron Avenue?
No.
Okay. And so your plan, although the board has asked.
Said the flooding is a relative term. You talk about which kind of storm. Of course, at some higher frequency storms, a lot of areas flood that don't. So it depends upon what situation, what storm event are we talking about.
Okay, and you've talked about directing an increased amount of flow from the sanctuary and from the lot, the combined lot, as we'll call it, into Springfield Avenue. Is that correct? Into that the Springfield Avenue storm sewer.
Yes.
Okay.
But it is still insignificant because, and again, if we now add the remaining part of the new sanctuary building going to the Springfield Avenue, it will still be offset by what we were reducing already, by reducing the impervious areas.
And are you aware that the Springfield Avenue storm sewer connects to the Waldron Avenue storm sewer at the terminus of the two streets?
At some point it does, yes.
Okay, so a backup in one would or could result in a backup or flooding in the other.
But obviously,
I'm not sure. Excuse me 1 second. I'm not sure how we can answer that question. I mean, you're asking them to reach a conclusion, Mr. Kronheim. I don't think you're an engineer, and you're hypothesizing something about this connection. What we've done is follow the city and board engineers' recommendations as to where the roof drains ought to be connected, at the direction of the person who's in charge of making sure that this works on behalf of the city. So,
but if one storm sewer, with all due respect, if one storm sewer empties into the other, it doesn't really matter whether you put it into Waldron directly or whether it goes into Waldron by backing up through Springfield Avenue.
It sure matters. It depends on which way it's flowing, it seems to me. But I don't think you're an engineer, and that's a fair question.
It's a fair question for an engineer. I don't have to be an engineer to ask an engineer a question. Okay. I just want to circle back on one other thing as to the physical condition of the property as it relates to parking, and handicap parking in particular. You testified that you didn't want the pavers in the front to be porous out of concerns for ADA compliance. Is that correct?
That's true.
And we've talked, I think it was the architect testified that there will be ramps into the building. It'll be handicap accessible, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But your plan calls for removing handicap parking spaces, correct?
Our plan is to remove all the parking spaces, existing ones.
Including handicap spaces.
That's right.
And you're not planning on building any or your plan doesn't include asking the city for marking any handicap spaces, correct? There's no handicap parking associated with your plan.
Not on site.
Okay. Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Kronheim. I'll pause as well for questions from other members of the public that are not represented by Mr. Kronheim.
Hi. Sorry, I'm turning on my video. Yeah, this is Kristen Suhill from 10 Waldron Avenue. We border the property where there are trees, and I just wanted to know more about there's the retaining wall you said that will continue to remain.
So the retaining wall.
What?
The retaining wall that will continue to remain is only up to a certain portion where it is retaining
right
grades between your property and the church property.
Beyond right? Well, so where the wall is right now, will any of that part be taken down?
No, the wall's not taken down. The garage wall will be taken down, but the retaining wall will stay.
Okay, and are you concerned it will be damaged at all? Because the parking lot runs all the way up to the wall. And when you demo the parking lot, will that damage the wall? Will it be rebuilt if it's damaged during the demolition of the parking, or?
No, that is not supposed to be damaged. It will be protected.
But if it is?
No means are required. The applicant, its contractor will be required to maintain the integrity of the.
Okay, and then there will be an additional on top of our fence built on top of that wall?
No, the fence will be inside.
The fence will be
away
inside.
from the property line.
Okay, so the wall will be there, and then
See the fence, 7-foot high wood fence tapering down to 4 feet as it goes towards Waldron Avenue.
okay, so would it be possible to put the fence on top of the wall? Because it looked like the fence was only as far as the wall is in the plans.
No, the fence goes all the way throughout.
Well, no, there was the wrought iron fence that I'd seen lining Waldron, but then along the property line.
That will be along Waldron only, and that 4 feet high.
Right.
That's where we'll start with the wood fence, 4 feet for about 10, 15 feet. It will taper up to from 4 feet to 7 foot high, and that 7 foot high will run all the way.
And it would be 7 feet from where the parking lot currently is, not from where the wall is.
That's right.
Okay. That's my main question and concern.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from members of the public that, again, aren't represented by Mr. Kronheim?
I have a question, if I could.
Sure. Can you state your name and your address and fire away?
Sure. Nancy Adams. I actually don't live in Summit, but I'm the executive director of Summit Downtown. I just wanted to follow up on a question that Mr. Kronheim asked of the witness with regard to handicap parking being removed from the site and where that would go. And he did say that, yes, all parking is removed from the site and handicap parking is removed from the site. So where is it anticipated that handicap parking would go? Is there an arrangement with the city to have handicap spaces taking existing parking spaces? So I just want more clarification on that question.
I would think that's a better question for the parking consultant who will testify next.
The engineer did answer that and answered it saying it would be removed from the site. So
That's
where
correct.
would it go?
But the
Right.
parking study by a parking expert can tell you where people
Okay,
are going
I'll
to park.
save my
We can
questions for
talk
that.
about that.
Okay.
Sorry, I just have one follow-up question to my wife on the retaining wall at 10 Waldron.
Can you just
Right
state
now,
your name. Sorry, sir. Can you just state your name for the records? and address again?
Peter 2 from 10 Waldron. There's just like a crack in the retaining wall right now. There's like a crack where it's just like settled over time, and it's just like not like a smooth wall. And if that's now going to be on our property line, like, can they at least like try to fix it as much as they can? Because it's just not like it's like jagged at different points where it's not like
It is certainly a fair question, and we will definitely discuss this with the and they should be able to.
Yeah, I would say definitely that if repairs are required once we do our demolition, we'll do them.
But this is even prior to demolition. There's already repairs needed.
Well, yeah, but we'll do it all at once. We're not going to do it twice. So.
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure that it's like nice and clean by the time it's done.
Correct.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the public for this witness? All right. Hearing and seeing none. Mr. Minner, do you want to try Mr. Titoni again before we take a brief break?
Yeah, let's see if we're lucky this time and can do that. Should only take a minute, and then a break would be great. Thanks.
That'd be great.
So, Mr. Titoni, are you out there?
We don't hear you, Mr. Titoni, or at least I don't.
I would recommend we take a break here, Mr. Chairman, and let Roger talk to him and see if they can figure it out?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's take an approximate 5-minute recess for some tech support. And Mr. Menor, good luck.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Thanks, Dennis. Let's see, is Mr. Titoni, how's your connection?
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now. All right,
Yes,
we'll
we
wait
can.
Very
for a
good.
few other members of the board to join, and then we'll
All
kick
right,
off.
very good. Great.
Steve, I'm here. I'm just starting my video.
Oh, okay, good. I just want to give Mr. Lardieri a minute there, I see.
Is Mr.
Grabbing us.
Kronheim on also?
Yeah, I see the ballroom there. I think Mr. Kronheim is with.
Okay.
Yep, there he is. I see the thumbs up. Just give Mr. Lardieri 30 more seconds to grab his snack in the kitchen, and then we can kick off.
I'll text him.
Thank you. Mr. Galvin, should we do a roll call before we begin again, or?
Oh, he's here.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
All right,
I think
Chris,
that's a
can you
good idea.
run us through a roll call real quick? And then Michelle, you're good?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Chairman Spur,
Here.
Chairwoman Newell,
Here.
Mr. Yuko,
Here.
Mr. Laderi. You're muted, sorry.
Here.
There you go.
All right, Mr. Mullen,
Here.
Ms. Schwartzstein,
Here.
Mr. Malay,
Here.
and Mr. Oikens.
Here.
Okay.
All right, wonderful, thank you. All right, Mr. Maynor, should we try Mr. Titoni? I heard his voice.
Yeah, let's get him while the getting's good. So,
All right.
Please proceed.
okay, Mr.
All right,
Titoni.
so-
So again, you're still under oath. Can you describe your conclusions as to those windows on the neighboring property?
Yes, there are 4 windows on the neighboring property. 2 of them we knew about. 2 of them you can't see behind the peak, but we found some historical aerials. We double checked, and the sanctuary building will not impede on those windows. We actually clear those windows, so we won't be blocking them up.
Okay, so those windows will still have light and air, correct?
Yes, they will.
Okay, that's all I was going to cover with Mr. Titoni.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go through the formalities here. So first, any questions from the board professionals regarding that additional testimony? Mr. Dow or Mr. Snekis, anything?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll offer board members an opportunity to ask any questions.
I have a question here.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
When we're looking at the Historic Preservation Commission letter, and they have some questions regarding the historic building adjacent that's going to be demolished. Is there any way that this project or the applicant accepts to keep a portion of it without demolishing and make it a part of the new building at the entrance? So the entrance will be a little bit not as wide as proposed. I'm not sure if that's a feasible solution, but that will satisfy the historic preservation, and it will, in a way, curtail the new building from Springfield Avenue.
Is that question directed to me, Roger?
Yes.
I guess it is. The answer to your question is no. There's no way. That's a house. And we did look at if there's any way to salvage a piece of it. It could not be used for the function of a 400-person sanctuary or even a lobby or a welcome gallery to move those kinds of people through it. So the simple answer is we did look at it, but it's not at all appropriate for its size or for the function of what this building will be.
Thank you.
Malay, any other questions for this witness from members of the board? Okay, hearing and seeing none. I will open it to the public. Mr. Kronheim, I mean, there's been fairly limited additional testimony tonight, but do you have any follow-up questions you'd like to ask of this witness?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. And any other members of the public not represented by Mr. Kronheim care to ask a question of this witness? All right, hearing and seeing none, I think that song and dance took longer than the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Totoni and Mr. Maynor, for your your technical support there. And Mr. Maynor, if you'd like to proceed to the next witness, we can do that.
Thanks. I don't think we need a break after that testimony. So.
No, thank you.
So I would like to call Betsy Dolan, please.
My hand is up.
All right. Do you swear or affirm a testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
State your full name for the record, spell your last name.
Elizabeth Dolan, D-O-L-A-N, Dolan and Dean Consulting, 181 West High Street in Somerville.
Mr. Chairman, Dolan and Dean have prepared before this board many times.
Welcome, Ms. Dolan. You
Thank
may
you.
proceed.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just one question before you start, Ms. Dolan. It was actually your firm that did the parking study for the 1999 application for the Unitarian Church in Summit. Is that correct?
Well, it was Gary Dean Associates, and Gary Dean Associates and Elizabeth Dolan Consulting joined in 2007 to form Dolan and Dean.
Okay, so your predecessor firm. So between you and your partner, you have a lot of familiarity with this neighborhood. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. So I would just ask you,
Roger, before you get going, is Mr. Kronheim, is he okay? He's not in the picture.
No objection. No objection to witnesses' qualifications.
All right, thank you.
thanks. So am I correct, Ms. Dolan, that you performed a parking study on behalf of the church in connection with this application?
Yes, that's correct.
And you're familiar with the plans proposed and that have been filed with the board and familiar with the application?
Yes.
And you've heard the testimony of the prior witnesses?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So I wonder then if you could just in a narrative way for the board, if you could explain what your parking study consisted of and the results of that study and your professional conclusions.
Yes, certainly. We opened this file in 2015, and it took a few years to get to the point where we actually completed and issued the January 27, 2020 study that's been submitted and reviewed. So during that course of a few years, we met with the church representatives a few times, talked about the goals of the project, talked about attendance levels. You heard at the last meeting how there are 2 Sunday morning services, also a small service Sunday evening. So we began counting parking in the area on Sundays and inventoried the parking available because the goal, as you heard at the last Zoom meeting, was to bring the 2 services together in one 10 o'clock service. That would be the 9:30 service that currently occurs and the 11 a.m. service that currently occurs, bring them together at one time. So the goal of our parking study was to determine if there was sufficient area parking to accommodate that overlap and concentration of all congregants attending one service. Our first studies were performed back in September and October of 2018. And they were somewhat limited in scope to Springfield Avenue, Waldron Avenue, Irving Place, and then the DeForest public parking over at the intersection of Summit and DeForest, about 1,000 feet from the site. And one of the things we encountered early on was there was a farmer's market going on at the public lot. So with the additional time as the application was still coming together, we then recounted and we excluded the public parking lot, and we counted on January 27, 2019, September 29, 2019, October 20, 2019. And of course, those were all Sundays. And from our original counts, we knew that the peak concentration maximum parking demand was as the first service on Sunday morning is ending and people are coming for the second one. So that 11 o'clock timeframe is sort of the focus of the peak concentration of parking demand in the area. So we, as I said, did not include the public parking lot at that time, but we did look at the more of the streets surrounding the Beacon location. So we had Springfield Avenue, Waldron Avenue, Irving Place, Hobart Avenue, DeBerry Place, Ruthven Place, and Franklin Place. And over the course of those 3 Sundays, we found at least 80 plus parking spaces available, and then performed a series of calculations based upon information from Beacon. We isolated the September 29th day for a detailed analysis, and that's summarized on page 6 of the submitted report. When Beacon had a total of only 181 attendees at the 2 Sunday morning services. And you heard at the last meeting that typically there's about 100 people attending the first service and about 115 at the second for 215. So we studied a day with a total of 181 attendees, which is light. And so the analysis was looking for more parking to support all of the possible additional attendees. We're talking about a new sanctuary with 400 seats. On September 29th, we had 181 attendees. So if you subtract the 181 from the 400 seats, we could add another 219 people if we were to fill the new sanctuary to capacity. The ordinance requirement that we just talked about earlier with the last witness is 1 space per 3 seats. So if we were looking to have 219 more people at one time, we divide that by 3 and we're looking for 73 more parking spaces. The summary of the parking counts that we performed indicated that on that particular day, there were 97 spaces available in that peak period, so that there would be sufficient parking to accommodate the concentration of all attendees at once. And that does account for the actual demand of the people who did attend the 2 services. So we looked, as I said, at parking within a reasonable walking distance of the site. We know that some of the congregants are using the DeForest public lot, but for this analysis, we didn't include that simply because there are times when the farmer's market or other things may limit the use of that. Then, of course, too, although the findings indicate that there's 80 to 90 plus parking spaces available on Sunday mornings at this peak concentrated time of parking demand, you also heard at the last meeting that everything right now is 100% virtual. So I would imagine it's going to take some time till we get back up to the parking demands that had existed a year ago when we started counting, or a year plus since we started counting. So when things do return to normal, and hopefully Beacon has the continued attendance, live attendance level that they've experienced for many, many years now, and people are driving the way they had been, there's every expectation that there's sufficient parking along the various roadways within reasonable walking distance to support the historic parking demands that are hopeful to return. So from an evaluation of the parking in the area and recognition that Beacon has never had any parking, our findings indicate that if they were to bring all the congregants together for one service in the new sanctuary, that there would be sufficient parking based on normal and typical and historic operations. And of course, you also heard that there hasn't been much increase in the membership at the church, and that attendance had been prior to COVID and the shutdowns had been rather routine. Some of the benefits I think that are associated with this site renovation are, of course, the amount of time that church parking occupies the neighboring streets is reduced, because instead of the 9:30 to noon timeframes associated with two services, it's 10 to 11. So you're reducing the time period that congregants are going to be parking on the adjacent roadways. We are eliminating the driveway on Springfield Avenue. You heard that from the engineering testimony. So all of the driveway movements associated with the commercial uses are eliminated. You're eliminating a conflict point, and sort of cleaning that up and reducing the trip generation that has historically been generated by the commercial users adjacent to the church. And from an overall access and circulation perspective, the ramp, we were talking about the handicap access, the ramp that's along the Waldron Avenue side will be maintained. The depressed curbs at the intersection of Waldron and Springfield will be maintained. The driveway will be eliminated on Springfield Avenue, and there will be a paver sidewalk system leading to the new entrance. So there's some thought that with reorienting the main entrance to the church to the Springfield Avenue side, that may encourage more use of the parking in the public lot at DeForest and reduce some of the dependency on the Waldron Avenue parking. And there was a comment, I believe, in the engineer's letter, it might have been number 24, about whether or not we should have a depressed curb along Springfield Avenue, where we're eliminating that driveway to help with some of the handicap access. And I think that's what was being asked earlier. And we would have no objection to that, whatever the board feels is appropriate. The plans as submitted show a full height curb where the driveway is on the Springfield Avenue side. But if a depressed ramp was thought to be appropriate, the applicant has no problem with that. So I think overall, our study has shown that under normal times when people are attending live services, there will be enough parking to support the congregation attending one service at 10 o'clock. And there are some improvements, particularly the elimination of the commercial trip generation associated with loss of that driveway and parking area on the commercial piece adjacent to the church.
A couple follow-up questions, Ms. Dolan. You are aware that the parking on Waldron has now been limited to one side of the street, the church side, I'll call it. I guess it's the west side of Waldron. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that happened since, I guess, the completion and submission of our study or somewhat in the same time frame.
Does that change in the parking ordinance impact your study or your findings in any way?
Well, I know there's an awful lot of parking that's further to the north at the Waldron end, but there's also parking on the various streets that I listed, as I said, within about 1,000 feet of the site. So I think if people are willing to walk maybe a few hundred feet to the north end of Waldron, there's certainly always parking there. But I don't see that the elimination of parking on Waldron will have a negative impact to church parking demands. But I do think that it allows for a smoother traffic flow when there is parking on the church side or west side of the street.
So to your knowledge, the church actually supported that change. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe they did.
Okay, thank you. You had talked about the dates on which you performed your counts. There's nothing atypical about those days in terms of no hurricanes, no blizzards, no nothing untoward.
No, they were fair weather, I would say, normal conditions, certainly nothing out of the ordinary that would reduce parking demands. From what I recall, and I was out there, they were rather nice days.
Okay. Now you had mentioned one of the benefits or factors here was the elimination of the traffic and parking activity from the commercial use, which is currently on the site, which is the Sotheby's Realty. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are you aware, happen to be aware of how many agents work out of that Sotheby's office?
I think there's several. I think it's in the 40 range. I don't recall the exact number, but I know that there's a lot of realtors involved with that business, and that parking lot, when I've been there, has sometimes been full to the point where some of the cars are double stacked.
Okay. And if I told you their website shows 69 agents registered in that office, would that surprise you?
It's a big number, but I do recall that there was some exchange about that information within our group.
Okay, thank you. I think finally there have been some questions asked about handicapped attendees at church, people who are physically challenged, both with respect to drop off, pickup, and the availability of handicap parking in public streets or in public lots. Could you just briefly address those questions?
Sure. It's my understanding, and I haven't observed handicap pickup drop off when I've been out there, but the handicap accessibility currently is on the Waldron Avenue side. There's a ramp that runs parallel to the sidewalk and street, and that accommodates a handicap accessibility into the building now. And so the pickup drop off is typically along the Waldron Avenue side. In the proposed condition, we have the ability to enter into the new building. The main access to the building will be on the Springfield Avenue side. So that will offer another means of pickup drop-off that can accommodate anyone really that's being picked up and dropped off. And also at the last hearing, you heard testimony from the Reverend about how some of the handicap motorists park also in the DeForest lot, and then other people bring them over, or they may use their own motorized wheelchairs to then come to the church property.
Okay, so that you've described what the existing condition is there. Is there anything about this plan that would cause you to conclude that that pattern of usage for the handicap parking would not continue to function properly?
It's my understanding through consultation with the church representatives that they're expecting that activity to remain generally as it is under existing conditions.
Okay, thank you. Last question or two. There were some questions asked of Mr. Patel, our engineer, about the possibility of adding a couple of parking spaces at the rear of the property instead of having green space or having a playground. Would some small number of spaces have any kind of material impact on your conclusions one way or another by adding that on-site parking to the site?
I don't, based on my understanding of the engineering that's been performed and the goals of the church, it would be a nominal amount of parking that could be configured on site. And since the church has been operating without any parking over all these years, and the town approved the application that was, I guess, 1999 or 2000 without parking, it's an existing condition, and we're looking to make some changes to modernize the way people worship and to bring the two services together at once. I don't think that providing 8, 10, 12 parking spaces on site is going to make any measurable difference to the real parking demand, which has been identified as, over 100 vehicles.
Okay. So just to sum up your testimony, it's your professional opinion that if this project is constructed, that it will continue to operate safely and effectively and efficiently from a parking standpoint?
Safely and efficiently, yes. It's an existing church relying on off-site parking. And I think one of the real benefits of this plan is improving safety by closing the commercial driveway and eliminating those trips that are entering and exiting on the busier Springfield Avenue frontage.
Okay. And you also consider it a benefit that the church's peak parking demands is essentially being compressed from a time standpoint here?
Yes, as I said earlier, the time frame, let's say 9:30 to noon, is the existing parking demand, with some people coming a little bit earlier, 9:15, going into 12:30 until everyone leaves. So it's a much longer parking demand on the adjacent roadway system under current conditions, and in the future that time frame is compressed with only one service.
Great, thanks. I have nothing further for Ms. Dolan.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dolan. Any questions from our board professionals with regard to Ms. Dolan's testimony? Mr. Dower?
I have no questions. They've answered everything that was in our letter regarding ADA access. That was it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Snickus, anything you'd like to?
Yes, just a few questions. Ms. Dolan, with regard to your study area, what did you use to help define your study area? What would you qualify the distances for these parking spaces?
I would say when I first, after consulting with the folks from the church and then walking and driving the area, figure 2 appended to the back of our report summarizes and shows the areas that we looked at. From my perspective, that would be roughly about 1,000 to 1,200 foot walk from the church property. I think the longest segment that we looked at was about 15 to 1,600 feet if you go all the way to the north end of Waldron Avenue. So it's, from our perspective, it was what was a reasonable walking distance, a comfortable walking distance from the church, and the available parking and the, of course, observed parking. And that's obviously on Waldron, Ruthven, and Irving, because Springfield Avenue doesn't afford much parking availability even on a Sunday morning. So we were looking at the adjacent roadways within a reasonable walking distance.
Okay. In your testimony regarding handicap spaces or handicap accessibility that's to this facility, I noted it, as you identified in your testimony, that you'll be eliminating a driveway along Springfield. Is there the ability, and I don't know if we can speak to it right now, of course, it takes into account the parking authority for Summit, the ability to add any additional spaces where that existing driveway is being eliminated, thereby adding potentially some possibly handicap spaces there. Is that a possibility from an engineering perspective?
I believe it is a possibility. I know there is in front of the church a sign, I believe, that says no parking anytime. But certainly there's some space there that could accommodate at least one handicap spot, or even a more formalized pickup drop-off spot. I mean, it's limited to pretty much Sunday mornings, but it could be formalized with input from the parking authority.
Maybe something the board can pursue if they're interested. I believe that's all the questions I had from this testimony. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the board for this witness?
Any consideration for bike ramps or bike access?
No, I don't know if that's part of the plan or has been discussed. I would think that there's probably room for that.
Yes, it's not something that's been discussed, but you know, if the board were interested in us having a bike rack of some kind on site, we could take a look at that for sure.
Thanks.
Ms. Schwartzstein, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, I have some questions.
Please.
Hi, Mrs. Dolan or Ms. Dolan. So I just want to be clear, when you're considering all of these parking spaces for the church, you're just looking at those adjacent streets. You're not taking into account public parking lots?
We did in the first go around, but then when we did the 2019, the 3 studies in the 2019, we did not go back to the DeForest lot.
So all of the parking for the church is supposed to be on these streets that you named?
Not that it's supposed to be, because we do know that there are people from the church who are using the DeForest lot. And that's actually on the website also. Their website talks about where to park, and they specifically reference the DeForest lot. It was just that we encountered the farmers market at one point, and so we figured, we know that parking lot is available. You don't have to pay for the public parking on Sundays, so I consider that to be a bonus above and beyond what we counted as available on the adjacent streets.
So just because you're mentioning the farmers market, and I realize, you know, you weren't hired or retained to analyze the farmers market, but where were people parking for the farmers market? Or did you notice any spillover onto these other streets, onto Waldron or Barry or Hobart?
You know, that's a good question. I didn't specifically study what was going on with the farmers market. We were really looking at what was available for the church at that time. So it was sort of a snapshot. And after that incidents, that's when we expanded the study to all of the other streets beyond Waldron, because it was obvious that there was a lot of parking on Waldron for the church.
And then I am familiar with that area, and I'm not sure if you know this because I don't exactly know it, but I know that there's a sign on one of those streets, and it may be Waldron, about not making a U-turn. Do you know which street that is?
That I don't recall. Let me just check my notes here. I know we looked at all of the different parking regulations, but I don't recall a no U-turn sign.
I think there is one on Waldron. This is Kristen Toole from 10 Waldron. Yeah. There is a sign, I think, at the end of the street that says no U-turns.
Thank you. So I was just wondering, your traffic study is for parking on Sundays, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't take into account parking during the week, correct?
No, because it's much less, that whatever the demand is much lower than on Sunday.
Right. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Newell, I see you eagerly. Go for it.
Thank you. Hi, Ms. Dolan. Quick question. Did you take into consideration the parking lot behind Riccardi Paint and the meat house? There's parking behind there.
Isn't that the private lot?
I'm not sure if is it private on Sundays? I think Monday.
Let me just be sure we're talking about the same place. Can you repeat the lot you're talking about?
It is right behind, there's a meat house and there's La Pasteria.
I can actually answer that. That's private parking and no.
Private, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That would make sense for some of the spillover.
Yeah, no, when I first got involved with the project, I asked about that lot and the ownership, and I was told it was private. And so there are signs that are posted at that entrance to the parking lot that it's for those users only. So that's not available for the church to use.
Okay.
Any other questions from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none. I had just two questions. Firstly, with regard to back to this question of the radius with which you've drawn around the subject property to consider parking and I guess as well traffic impact. Is there some best practice or some standard distance with which you or a traffic expert would typically draw as a radius around? It sounds like you, and I certainly understand, consulted the church and kind of what their present parishioners are practicing, but is there some standard best practice you typically utilize?
You know, I don't think I've ever studied a church in a more downtown setting and looked at parking. This is more of a unique downtown, semi-urban type of situation. And I think it comes down to, personal preference. And if someone doesn't want to have to walk a little longer, maybe they're going to be coming to the area earlier. But I think it's certainly something that is an existing condition. The church has lived with this condition for a while. And so having been there and observed what was going on and talking to the people and walking and driving through the adjacent roadway system, well, to me, it seemed reasonable to walk 1,000 feet. Certainly for, if my dad were going here, he wouldn't find that to be acceptable. So I think it's somewhat of an individual approach to what time you're getting here, what service you're going to, what your individual tolerances.
And is it safe to assume that the greatest density of attendees of these services will occur on Waldron, on Springfield, and the streets immediately proximate to the property and then dissipate as it kind of extends further out?
Oh, sure. And I think you see that, well, we did see that when the live services were being held. I mean, Waldron that's the place to go. That's the first and most popular. Across the street from Springfield Avenue, there's plenty of parking over there, but that's not as easy and you have to cross the street. That makes DeBarry a little bit more, of a preference for some people if they don't want to have to walk across Springfield Avenue. But definitely Waldron, because of that's where the church is. That's the first and most popular location to park.
And then Mr. Galvin can slap me on the wrist if this is outside the purview of the board, but with regard to the traffic impact, do you foresee a need, given the proposed configuration of a single service, for any kind of additional traffic controls? And I'm not talking necessarily about a traffic light. Please, my right hand is raised. I'm not proposing that in the middle of our downtown, but a traffic cop or someone to control traffic on Waldron and Springfield, for example, to assist the safe crossing of parishioners that have parked across the street.
You often see that at my church in Scotch Plains, when the service is letting out, they often would have a police officer there because everybody's coming out of one parking lot at one location, and to get the people either in or out, a police officer would break up the flow on the street. Here, people are distributing themselves to a parking location that makes sense for them, that suits wherever their origin and destination is, whichever direction they're coming from. And so unless the church started to see a concentration of activity that might warrant that type of assistance, I don't think that we need anything, because just by the very nature of the roadway system and the lack of beacon parking, the traffic's already distributing. I don't see a concentration point that might require that type of control.
Okay. No, and you're right. My point of reference is a synagogue on Summit Avenue that, for that reason, has a single point of ingress and egress to the property, and I believe utilizes a police officer or some traffic control personnel. So at least from what you see of the site, its present use or even its anticipated use, you don't necessarily foresee a need for the congregation to arrange for such additional traffic control.
No, and I think now that with websites and the information that can be provided that way to new congregants, I like the website. I like the way they had it phrased. When live services resume, here's where you can park.
Thank you. All right, before I hand it off to Mr. Kronheim, any other questions from members of the board? All right then, Mr. Kronheim, play nice here with Mr. Galvin, but please, you're welcome to begin.
We'll do our best.
Thank you.
I would start by referring to the 2000 resolution. I'm happy to pull a copy of it. It doesn't need to be marked. It's in the application packet. I can share my screen here just for the sake of, just bear with me. Let's see, share screen. Hopefully you can all see this. Let's see, just so we are all looking at the same thing. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Ms. Dolan, thank you for your testimony. I wanted to start by referencing the study that was done in 2000, again, by your predecessor firm. But I do want to ask you about the second sentence here, if you wouldn't mind just reading aloud the sentence that begins, Mr. Dean's parking study demonstrated.
I have to find it. Where is it? Oh, number 9?
Yes, number 9, the second sentence of number 9.
Mr. Dean's parking study demonstrated that the existing on-street parking will be adequate to serve the present and anticipated needs of the church, and that the loss of the parking lot presently located at the Whitridge Avenue site will not be detrimental nor cause any parking or traffic difficulties in the neighborhood.
And so just to be clear, this condition is described in paragraph 9. That's the current condition, correct? Pre-existing, sorry, the condition prior to the plan that's been submitted.
The Whitridge site was part of the 1999 or 2000 application at the north end of Waldron that was being eliminated and then consolidated at the subject site.
Right. So I guess let me rephrase. The in 2000, it was Mr. Dean's study held that, or suggested that there would be no, to use his words, there will be that there will be not detrimental nor cause any parking or traffic difficulties in the neighborhood. That plan. Do you stand by that conclusion today?
Well, he was studying elimination of parking at a site that is no longer part of Beacon's involvement. They were eliminating that site, and so I studied present day activity. I can't necessarily speak to any observations of that Whitridge site because I didn't study that at all.
Okay, I'll try one more time. Let me rephrase. Do you feel that the church in its current configuration causes any parking or traffic difficulties in the neighborhood?
I think there's certainly a parking demand that's felt by the neighbors in the area, but I would not characterize it as unsafe.
Okay, well, then let me, I believe on direct, you referenced what is, I'd asked the board to take judicial notice of as ordinance 20-3217, passed this summer by the city council, which prohibits street parking on the east side of Waldron. Any objection to that, Mr. Galvin? Okay.
An ordinance? Why would I object to an ordinance?
I'm asking whether you'll take judicial notice of it, that's all. And the, without, I guess I would ask you, why, in your professional opinion, would the city eliminate parking on Waldron if there was no parking problem?
Well, I think as I mentioned in my testimony, to enhance the flow and so that two-way traffic can generally pass and allow one-sided parking. That's typically why that's done.
So by enhancing it, you're suggesting that there was a problem prior to that.
There's parking on both sides and it's a two-way street. So sometimes the traffic in one direction would have to pull over to let a vehicle pass in the opposing direction. So it's a common type of thing that happens on a road where there's parking on both sides.
Okay, so then I'll refer to your reports dated January 27th, 2020. That ordinance is from July. I noticed you didn't update your report. Why?
Why didn't I update my report in July of this year?
That's right, after the passage of the ordinance.
Because we're in COVID and nobody's going to church.
But so you don't feel that the elimination of 36 of the, I think it was, let me start again. You just said Waldron is the sort of most common place for people to park in your direct testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, it's the closest parking, correct?
Right.
Okay, and so you don't feel that eliminating 36 spaces on that street somehow has a material impact on the study?
Well, I think it certainly has some impact, but there's a couple of different things going on. And as I testified, there are various streets within reasonable walking distance that have parking. We also didn't account for the use of the DeForest lot, which we know parishioners are using. And so while we've lost some parking on Waldron, there's still parking on the adjacent roadways and at the public lot. So in addition to the fact that we don't know when we're going to get back to live services with the full attendance levels that had historically been active at Beacon.
But your study does not study, for lack of a better word, the current condition on the street because it does not take into account the ordinance that prohibits parking on one side. Is that correct?
That's correct. This was done before the ordinance was passed and the restriction was imposed.
Okay. I guess I'd ask, why did you limit your analysis to Sundays?
Because that's the peak concentration of parking demand for Beacon.
Okay, but is it the peak concentration of parking demand for the town?
No.
When is the peak demand of parking for the town?
Well, it depends what's going on, but if dining is a peak period, weekends are peak periods, people coming in and working in town. So there's different peak parking for the different uses within Summit.
And you're aware, we heard direct testimony from the Reverend that there are activities on the church calendar pretty much every day of the week, and you're aware of that fact, correct?
Yes.
Did you analyze how any of that parking demand would interact with higher demand in the downtown area?
No.
In particular, I want to call your attention to some of the larger events that take place at times other than Sundays. In particular, the church has indicated in their calendar that they conduct a number of weddings on Saturdays. Does your study in any way indicate what the parking demand would be like on a Saturday evening with a full wedding in the new sanctuary?
No.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Did you make any attempt with any other, to provide for any off-site parking? Any arrangements with other neighboring landowners or any other off-site parking?
I cannot speak for the church. I did not do any of that. And you heard from the Reverend at the last meeting, the idea of renting 6 spaces from the city. But beyond that, that would be a question for the Reverend.
Okay. But it was your testimony that even a nominal amount of parking spaces wouldn't, I think it was, I'll use your, that adding a few spaces would be only a nominal amount of parking. Is that correct?
Based on my understanding from the engineer's testimony, yes.
But with events on every day of the week, would a nominal amount of parking also help would it help or hurt the amount of parking that would be burdening the neighborhood from church?
Well, it would reduce the burden on the off-site parking need if there was some on-site parking.
Okay. Can you explain to me the just mechanically as a parking expert, if 400 people are going to descend on, up to 400 people might descend on the church at once, how is that drop off going to work mechanically?
Well, not everyone is dropped off. There's a few people that are dropped off. We were speaking earlier about handicapped people who may be dropped off, but people who are driving themselves are driving to the area, choosing a parking space based on where they like to park, how far they're willing to walk. So it's not a 100% or even a high percentage of drop off. It's some drop off, but the majority of the activity is self-parking.
Do you have any statistics, or are you familiar with the number of senior or disabled congregants?
No.
Okay. But we did hear testimony from the Reverend that there was a quote silver tsunami, that there are a sizable number of elderly or aged congregants. Is that correct? Would you agree with that assessment?
I know she talked about the different characteristics of the congregants, but I don't remember that specific statement.
Fair enough. And you haven't conducted a study to see how many of the congregants actually drive every week?
No.
Okay. And generally speaking, you've talked a lot about the ramps and curb cuts and access onto the property for those in wheelchairs. But you've made no provision whatsoever on-site or off-site for handicap parking. Is that correct?
No, we only discussed through Mr. Snykes' questioning earlier the possibility of exploring that on Springfield Avenue.
Okay. But generally speaking, as a parking expert, in your professional opinion, handicap spaces are located as close as possible to the intended use, are they not?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. You've talked also about how by shifting to one service, you'll have a shorter period of time during which the parking demands will affect the downtown and the neighborhood. But during that period, that demand will be more intense, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Significantly more intense?
I don't know that I can define it as significantly more.
Okay. Let's see. No further questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cronheim. All right. Any other questions from members of the public not represented by Mr. Cronheim?
I do have some questions. So
You state your name again and your address for the record.
Nancy Adams, Executive Director of Summit Downtown. So I don't know if that's 18 Bank Street or you want my Maplewood address, you can let me know. So I just had a couple questions. I feel like, so I'm dealing with, as you know, I manage the downtown district. So I'm concerned about the businesses, the business community, the fact that there's always, with every downtown, and I've been doing downtown management and redevelopment for more than 25 years. So there's
limited to questions.
I know. I just want to bring this out to you. So my point is,
you got to ask questions.
I'm trying to ask a question if you'd
right.
let me. So my question is, given my background and experience in parking difficulties in downtowns in general, and specifically in Summit, I'm a little concerned that there's no discussion about anything other than one service on a Sunday. So I'd like to know if there's any analysis done for the rest of the week or other times that is very relevant to the survival of the businesses in downtown by this parking expert.
None of that's been studied because it's all existing. It's all happening now and being absorbed. The parking demand is being absorbed in the immediate area. So that's why there was no study of other timeframes, because the church isn't looking to change any of its operations, but for the Sunday morning, combining the two services into one.
Except that, okay, so there's not going to be any weddings in the 400-seat additional site. There's not going to be any funerals. There's not going to be any events going on days other than 11 a.m. on Sundays.
It would be comparable to what is happening now. You have an occasional funeral. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fill up the capacity of the sanctuary. Those are occurrences that are part of the church operation. So we're talking about an increase in seating capacity, but just that doesn't mean that every wedding is now going to be larger. And I believe the testimony was that it's services only, no what do you call it? No party afterward. I think that was the testimony from the Reverend. I'm looking for my notes.
Well, yeah, I think her testimony was that no one holds receptions
Receptions, thank you. Yep.
in the hall underneath the old, the existing chapel.
Right.
Correct. And she also testified about the incidence of weddings and that we don't see this changing that at all.
Okay, so
Right. That operations are being maintained.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. People were speaking.
Go ahead.
I didn't hear Dylan.
Okay, so I guess I don't understand what's to prevent more service times from happening, but I guess that'll go later to another professional. You said you studied the DeForest lots or use of DeForest. Which DeForest lot are you referring to when you say the DeForest lot in all your testimony?
The public lot at the corner of Summit and DeForest.
And there are two other DeForest lots as well. So you keep referencing the farmers market, which my organization manages. So when you reference the farmers market, what lot are you referring to?
This is in I guess it's the northwesterly corner of the Summit Avenue and DeForest, or southwest corner.
Of Summit and, okay, so that's not where the farmers market's located. So.
Okay, so Summit, I'm sorry, I don't have the map in front of me.
So I think I probably can clarify that. I mean, I think what we're talking about is the parking demand in that Summit, that lot that's at the corner of Summit and DeForest that might be generated by the farmer's market, since the farmer's market takes another lot out of usage on Sunday mornings.
Okay. So just to clarify, the farmers market, the Summit Farmers Market has about 35 vendors. We this year moved it to the lot at the corner of DeForest and Woodland, but generally on an average day, it generates between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. 4,000 visitors. That's an average day of the farmers market. That's not anything special. That's pre-COVID.
Sorry, Ms. Adams, just pause for a quick moment here. Dennis, this is, in my opinion, getting a little bit close to testimony, and I would argue relevant testimony. Should we swear Ms. Adams in?
Oh.
Sorry. Can you hop off mute so we can hear what you're saying?
My head swung back and forth, though.
That's all right. Thank you.
I think at this point, it's just questions of Ms. Dolan. I don't want to introduce any additional information.
Okay. So let's keep it to questions. Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Yep. I just wanted to know, so given that there are 4,000 average attendees to the farmers market using not just lot 1 on the DeForest and Summit corner that you're referencing, but all over the downtown and beyond. So did you take into consideration any of that? Because that's quite a number of attendees that come in and out from 8 to 1.
We accounted for anything that was happening on the various Sundays that we inventoried parking. So if there was overflow demand from anything else happening in downtown Summit on the roads that we were counting cars, then that was accounted for. But we were very specific in looking at the overlap between the two services, which is generally around 11 a.m. on Sundays. And that was the focus. So anything that was happening in Summit at that time that created a parking demand was part of the study.
Okay, so I'd like to refer to the fact that I understand that the study was done prior to the change in the ordinance, but I guess personally I'm unsatisfied with the answer that those 36 spaces, because you testified that 80 plus parking spaces are available on surrounding streets and specifically Waldron Avenue. And there's a removal now of 36 of those spaces. And you say that that shouldn't have any real impact. And I have trouble swallowing that.
Is there
So
any
if you,
sorry,
Not
Ms.
a
Adams, a
question.
question. Yeah.
my question is, can you clarify that and try to make me and others perhaps comfortable with why 36 spaces removed from the immediate area does not impact, in your view, significantly the parking demand and the parking supply?
First of all, I don't know where the number 36 came from, but when we looked at the availability of parking on Waldron, there were anywhere from only 14 to 20 spaces available on Waldron. But there were plenty of spaces on all of the other streets that we were talking about, Irving Place, Hobart, DeBarry, Ruthven, and Franklin. And so in addition to close to 70 of those spaces not being in the Waldron tally, and I understand that there's a displacement of some of the people who had been using Waldron, there are other streets and more of the streets that we did study that have capacity. Does it mean the people have to walk maybe another 200 or 300 feet? Yes. We didn't include the DeForest lot. And we're also talking about a pre-COVID condition, which was a constant for Beacon for 20 plus years. And right now, we don't know when we're ever getting back to that level. So I know I was asked earlier, why didn't I go back out and count after the new parking prohibitions were posted on Waldron, but we don't have any live services now. We don't know when we're getting back to that. So there's a buffer in that, plus there's a buffer in the public parking that wasn't accounted for in the public lots, in addition to the ability of people to walk maybe a couple hundred feet more to get to parking that's definitely available on the adjacent streets.
So there's no supplement to those spaces other than walking farther and parking further away?
Under normal conditions, yes.
Well, we're planning, this is long-term, unless this building's only going to be a couple of years in existence. We have to plan for long-term.
Right.
So
and
that's why I'm asking you about that, because for the long-term health of the
Stop there.
business.
Stop.
I'm stopping.
She gave her answer. She gave her answer. Ask another question. Her
Absolutely.
answer is they're going to walk further. That there's plenty of parking provided further away, and that they'll have to walk farther. And if it's too far for someone to walk to church, then they won't come.
With all due respect, Mr. Galvin, I wish that were true. Otherwise, we'd have no parking problem in Summit downtown. So my last question would be with regard to the handicap parking spaces that are being removed completely. Do you think if the removal of maybe the playground that will only be used here and there could provide handicap parking spaces so that there's no removal of shopper parking spaces or downtown employee parking spaces that are currently on street on Springfield Avenue and downtown Summit, that maybe there be some ability to have at least handicap spaces on site?
There's a lot in that question. To clarify that we're not taking away downtown spaces, we're taking away uses that create a parking demand, and those commercial spaces are being eliminated, and with that, some parking demand that can't be met on site. With regard to providing a handicap space on site, that would have to be looked at in terms of the distance to the doorway. We also talked about possibly having a handicap space and or drop-off area on Springfield Avenue. So certainly, as I said earlier, if we could put parking spaces, it would be a handful or so, based on what I understand from the engineering. I don't know how or if we could configure it to comply with ADA requirements. That would have to be discussed with the engineer.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Any other questions from members of the public for this witness?
Yeah, I just have a question. Kristen Toohill again, 10 Waldron Avenue. Ms. Dolan, do you currently live in an area where people are parking in front of your house regularly?
You don't have to answer that question. She's a paid traffic expert.
Well, no, it just seems like people don't take into account all the hardships of people parking in front of your house all the time. I was wondering if anyone else has been blocked into their driveway by people being in front of their driveway, whether people regularly at night have, headlights shining into their windows at night from people turning around in their driveway to park in front of the church to attend the services at night or the events going on at night. Like, it is a real hardship for the people in Waldron to have to deal with people parking and turning around in their driveway and shining lights in their house all the time. And it's something that we didn't know about or consider when we bought our house. And now people want to do it more. And I don't know, it's just, I was wondering why people just seem so blasé about parking in front of everyone's house on Waldron and the surrounding areas.
I don't know if there's a question there for me, but I will say again, this is an existing use that's been here without parking on site for many, many years. It was approved 20 years ago without parking, and we're looking to continue the use of the church in the setting.
Well, it affects the neighbors, and then to have it sprinkled.
Ms. Toohill, there'll be a portion of the meeting here, the application, where you'll be able to provide commentary on the application. But this time is reserved just for questions for the witnesses. So, any specific questions you'd like to ask, though, about similar circumstances or anything else to help you better prepare for your commentary?
Not right now, not.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of the public for this witness? All right, hearing and seeing none. Mr. Maynard, the hour is getting late.
I'm with you.
And I understand you have one more witness you'd like to be heard on this case?
Yeah, we have our planner, and obviously I don't want to start him for 10 minutes and then come back with that. So
in the interest of my board members' fatigue, I've seen Mr. Mullen yawning a few times too many.
I also have a question for Mr. Kronheim.
Okay, yes, Mr. Galvin, please.
Yes, Mr. Galvin.
Are you there?
Yes, I am.
How much of a case do you have? How many nights are you going to take?
I think it would depend on how long the planner would take, but I think we probably need more than an hour, I would think.
I think so too. Because what we're going to probably do is carry Mr. Spur, you can disagree with me, but we think we're going to carry this to a night where we're going to hear a case first. And I think we need, the question I'm trying to decide with the chairman is, do we go in December and give this one night all to itself, and can we wrap it up in one night? And if we're not so lucky that we can wrap it up in one night, maybe we ought to go do one small case before you guys, and then give you the balance of a November meeting, and then if we don't finish, go to this December meeting. What do you think, Mr. Chairman?
Chris, can you give me any sense of what that November case looks like? Is it a fairly straightforward residential case? Because it sounds like Mr. Kronheim's hour plus, let's say 30 minutes for the planner generously, plus public commentary sounds like a full meeting, but what is that November 16 meeting look
Or
like?
can we move the residential to another night?
No, it looks like it's a FAR variance.
Okay. So it sounds to me like we will use a full evening, very frankly. So Mr. Minor, I mean, unless you object to a December 7th dedicated session, I'm certainly happy to try it on the 16th of November, but run the risk that we're going to be running late. And in my experience, the public, the applicants, the board members, frankly, are not always in their sharpest mindset late into the evening.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think having one night makes sense.
Okay, so with that, we'll ask your acceptance of it's December 7th, Chris. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Kronheim, are you good with that also? You're gonna have everybody you need on December, if we go to December 7th, you can be okay?
Yeah, let me confirm with my experts that they can make the 7th, but I don't foresee a problem there.
Okay. All right, so then we'll plan for December 7th and waiving any need for further notice. Do I need a vote on this, Dennis, or anything?
Yes.
Yes,
We
all
need a
right.
motion and a second to carry this matter to the December 7th. We need Mr. Maynard to consent to a waiver of time, which the board has to act.
I so waive the time period.
Okay.
I
Go ahead. And I need to say one more thing. Go ahead.
Okay, do I have a motion to carry to the 7th?
I'll move to carry this to December 7th.
Okay, a second? Second, all right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Seeing none.
So that's Mr. Kronheim, you brought up about the new protocol that was put forth by the DCA. I just want to make sure you know my counter position on that now, so you're not surprised, which is the time of application rule. At the time this was filed, those noticing provisions weren't available to us. So while you're going to reserve all your rights to all that other stuff, I just want to make sure you understand that I don't know how I could have made this applicant complied with that protocol after the case got started. So
I understand that. I understand the board's position. I certainly still reserve my my
Yeah.
object to it, and
No problem.
certainly object to the you could also have not have provided for a Zoom meeting under the municipal land use law. So I think my position is clear.
No, I agree with you.
So.
I agree with you. The Zoom is an outcropping of the governor's emergency. So.
All right. With that, we'll see Mr. Maynard, Mr. Kronheim, and the rest of the team here on the 7th of December for the continuation of this case.
Great.
I would ask for the board members, please don't leave. It looks like we have a couple of minutes to approve and resolutions to memorialize. So thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, Chris, if you can help us, let's wrap the evening.
Yeah, sure. So first resolution to memorialize is 10 Lafayette Avenue, application ZB 20-2017. Eligible voting members are Vice Chairwoman Newell, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Malay, and Chairman Spur. So we need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Vice Chairwoman Newell,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Mr. Malay,
Yes.
Chairman Spur.
Yes.
And the next resolution is 19 Evergreen Road, application ZB-20-2006. Eligible voting members are Vice Chairwoman Newell, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Malay, and Chairman Spur. And we need another motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Vice Chairwoman Newell,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Mr. Malay,
Yes.
Chairman Spur.
Yes.
And we have a set of minutes from September the 21st that we need to approve, and we need another motion.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Come on.
I'll second it.
There we go. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, seeing.
And then just finally, Chris, can you just, we had on the agenda an annual report note, but you just kind of bring the board up to speed on that just generally.
Sure. So the annual report was forwarded to you guys. It's those are all the cases which were from 2019. This is the time for the board to reflect on all those past cases and make a recommendation to the governing body as to, you know, how they feel, if they think something else could be considered in an ordinance to that effect. But you know, this is mainly just on the agenda so you guys can review what was submitted, kind of look at the nature of all the variances that were either approved or denied, and then, you know, you guys can discuss it and decide what you want to do.
And then just Chris, last thing is, so if and when board members have comments, questions, suggestions, they should send them back to you to then kind of reconcile and return probably a final draft.
It's usually done via resolution. So Dennis, I believe we've done them via resolution in the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've, you know, boy, we've been doing this for a long time. It's some of the boards have really wanted to get into suggestions that they wanted to make to the governing body and to the planning board. I'm not feeling it this year. I mean, do the board members, do you have suggestions you'd like to make based on what we've experienced this year that you think certain things should be looked at or modified?
And I had one that came to mind.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Driveways. When people, we've seen a few cases where people have had a side setback encroachment on their driveway. They've demolished the entire driveway and rebuilt it in its entirety, and then had to come beg for forgiveness rather than permission when they rebuilt it. It just seems silly.
Wait a minute, the last couple of your words were all mushed together.
Oh.
Beg for forgiveness is the last I heard.
Okay, beg for forgiveness instead of permission. And it just seems silly for them to have to do that.
Well, the problem is that if you don't go in for the permit before you pick up the driveway, that's what's putting him in the spot.
Right.
It seemed logical to them that they could just replace the existing driveway. Our zoning officials always taken the position that if it's a non-conforming driveway and you completely terminate it, you remove it completely, that's total destruction. So when you have total destruction, she does not have the authority to allow them to repave it.
Right. No, I get that. I'm recommending to the governing body that they amend the ordinance accordingly and give her the authority to grant permission for basically a straight up concurrent rip and replace.
I'm
We're
not
needlessly making people break things up into two-part resurfacings, basically.
Can you, Ed, I don't know if you can weigh in, Ed, but could you think about it after tonight? We don't have to answer everything tonight. We're floating things that we're considering. We have the same problem.
Understood.
With air conditioners.
Yeah, what happens in that situation is the destruction of a pre-existing non-conforming condition, which commonly the zoning officer doesn't have the authority to do regardless, because it doesn't meet the ordinance standards. It's like taking out an addition on a house that previously didn't conform. I'll take a look at it and see what I can offer to the board at a subsequent meeting.
I see what David's saying, because it's a deterrent to fixing your driveway, essentially. Like if you have a driveway that's non-conforming, you have a curb cut that's too big, then you can't even resurface your driveway and get it fixed properly if it's been like 25 years until you get a variance.
Well,
and then you may not, what if you don't get it or something? And then it's just a much bigger hassle.
No more driveway. No, listen, the problem that, I'm presenting, Ed, and is that the law generally, there's some things we can't delegate. In other words, we could change the ordinance to make the driveway permitted in that location, but we can't kind of say a pre-existing non-conforming use can just be, there's certain sensitivities in the law that make it difficult. You can change the standards, but the law is very clear on the elimination of non-conforming structures. So Ed will take a look at it and see if he can make a suggestion.
Yeah,
We have to look at
I think the key.
How many driveways? like, what's the problem with the driveways? What made them not, I think we should look at what made them non-conforming.
But like, I wouldn't be able to redo my driveway because it was non-conforming, right? It's like too big and it has too big of a curb cut, but that's how I bought my house like that. So if I wanted to rip up my driveway and resurface it, I'd have to get a variance again.
It depends. If you don't touch the curb cut, you wouldn't. If the deviation is the proximity to the sideline, then yeah, you probably would need to get our permission to do that.
But I've seen people do it in two parts, right? So they resurface the top part. They've done 50% of their driveway, so it's not a full destruction. Then they resurface the other part and they stage it. So we're not accomplishing anything. And I think that's the frustration that we have with these things.
We have to be smart, though, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I got you.
We have to come up with a smart solution. I agree with you that it's not a sensible cause for a variance, but there's some things that seem like an easy fix to this that violate other parts of the land use law. We can't delegate. We can't allow non-conforming uses to continue. We could eliminate a non-conforming use by making it conforming, but that goes to the issue of maybe our setback isn't right. We have to see if we can figure out a way to legally accomplish what you're asking. This is not. It seems really simple, but it's not as simple as it seems.
Last question, Chris, then around time frame. So when are we targeted to submit this to the governing body? Just so that the board members can reflect on this, submit it. You and I maybe can pass some notes back to Ed and Chris and Dennis just to get into final form.
I'm looking at the calendar now. The council meets December 1st and November the 16th. Probably want a little bit of time with it. That December 1st date kind of seems pretty attainable to mull everything over and try and prepare a resolution and get everything together. So we could transmit the resolution to the clerk, pretty much we would meet November 16th as well. So we want to try and aim for that and then transmit it afterwards on, for the December 1st council meeting.
So something like initial round of comments by the start of November would be helpful. And then we'll kind of take it from there. Okay. Wonderful.
You can do that.
And if anybody knows what driveways you're talking about, send the address over to Ed so he can take a look at what we did.
Yeah, I'd like also to talk to Krista about it as well.
Yeah. Some people have been, this is a long-standing thing where somebody is like ripped up a driveway and we saw them, or somebody removed an air conditioner and we saw them, and they're freaking out. And it's just because they're a non-conforming structure in a non-conforming location. And once you demolish it completely and completely remove it, they lost their right to it. So they had to come to us. It's probably 4 or 5 a year that fall into that category. I'm not 100% how we're going to solve it.
Interesting.
All right. With that, barring any further questions, let's adjourn and head off to bed. It's a school night. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.